Thank you, Bob, and thank you, distinguished professors from all over the world. I was also once a professor, but I wasn't good enough, so I went to business. The joke goes like this, that I was teaching innovation and entrepreneurship in Tel Aviv University Business School. So one of my students asked me once, you know, the Israeli are chutzpah. You know Israeli chutzpah? If you're so smart, how come you're not rich? So I said, okay, he has a point. So I left the university in 1994 and started Jerusalem Global Ventures, which is a company that helps startup companies get money to get going. And I thought that I'm a smart professor and I know everything how to do, but the truth is that I was more lucky than smart, and we had a lot of successful investments that you heard before, and some more that I will tell you about shortly. But let me begin by talking about the time. As you probably know, we are now in the month of Nisan, exactly 3,328 years ago. Our forefathers came out of Egypt. And of course, we all know in Egypt, we know it from the Seders that all of us do. We were slaves in Egypt to Pharaoh, and God sent Moses to take us out of Egypt. But that's only half of the story. The second half, that he brought us to Sinai and gave us the Torah. And as we say in the Seder, he took us from Avdut to Cherut, from slavery to freedom. And really, the number one message of going out of Egypt is freedom. That the people are free to choose. That includes, obviously, economic freedom as one of the fundamental pillars behind freedom. For example, you know about the great flood that happened at the beginning, when Noach, built the ark. It says the reason for the flood was because people didn't respect the property rights of one another, because they were stealing and embezzling each other's property. So one of the principal things of Jewish values, like it says in the Ten Commandments, is not lo tignov, do not steal, and not even tachmod. How do you say tachmod? Don't envy, what other people have. You have to respect the property rights of other people. And indeed, the Jewish values are completely free enterprise. People are supposed to give for charity, but it's not a tax. Today we have a tax to take money from you, and the government says they're going to do good things with it. However, according to Jewish principles, this is not the job of the government. It's each individual's job to, even if he's not very rich, to take 10% of his income and do good things with him. But there's no police or government on top of him to force him to do it. He has to do it from his own belief of the system. So it's very, very important to understand this difference, because government always tells you, we're going to take more taxes and we're going to do good things with it. The problem is that it's not the role of government to do redistribution of income. And moreover, anybody who read Milton Friedman knows that when a person takes his money and makes his own decisions, are always going to be better when somebody takes other people's money and supposedly allocates them to other people for whom he doesn't have any personal contact. So this is just a general background. I'm not going to talk about this. You have great professors here that are much better than me. But I wanted to connect this with the time and the values of our people. As far as my own background, as Bob mentioned earlier, I was actually on academic track. I had a PhD in MIT. I came to Israel and became a faculty member in Tel Aviv University School of Business. I started the entrepreneurship program, teaching innovations and entrepreneurship, etc. But one of the reasons I left academia and went to business, a serious one, not the one I told you before, was that the government controls the university system in Israel. As a result, all professors in Israel are equal. They all make a minuscule salary because they're all equal, because the government decides that the professor will earn so much. It doesn't matter if he's good or not good, and it's an excellent professor. So what happens? The best professors, you'll find them in Stanford. The best Israeli professors are in Stanford. Why? Because in America, the university system is competitive. Rule number one in economics is competition creates excellence. Excellence for the customer, excellence for the provider. And this is not limited to business. It's true in amutot, in the third sector. If you have many amutot that are competing to give a particular service, they'll do a much better job than if it's regulated. For example, if you want to get electricity today, you get a good service or bad service? Bad service, because only one company in Israel from which you can get electricity. However, if you want to go and have a nice dinner at a restaurant, you'll get an excellent service. You know, there are world-class restaurants in Israel. Some of them are expensive for people who want to spend a lot of money. Some of them are cheap. But the people who are not good are going to go out of business, and the people who are good, on average, will supply a very good service. You don't need government regulation. You don't need anything. What is the reason that Israel became a very expensive place to live in? What is the reason? Right. Why there is no competition? Because of the government. And it's not because of bad intentions. But you'll probably hear much more about it from the distinguished professors here, or if they don't talk about it, you can read Milton Friedman. But just give you one little example. If you want to be an entrepreneur, and for example, bring a new brand of bicycles that they make in Spain, which is a great bicycle, and you want to bring it to Israel, you will have to go to מכון התקנים, what do you call it in English? Say again? Standard Institute of Israel. And even though those bicycles have been approved in Spain and all of the European community, you will have to pay something like $100,000 to get them approved in Israel, which is completely ridiculous because you kill a small business. You cannot have a small business. Only big businesses can afford to pay such prices in advance. This is just a little example. Not talking about if you want to importer of car, it's going to cost you millions to get the cars approved or to get the license. And this is the reason that the cost of living is so high. It applies to all areas, etc. However, I think the most free sector of the Israeli economy is the high-tech sector, the startup sector. Why? Because they're not selling in the local market. Israel market is very small. Usually, unlike in the US, like in Silicon Valley, a startup company typically will try to conquer the US, a huge market, $300 million and 300 million people and more. And once they establish themselves in America, they'll go to the rest of the world. However, in Israel, 8 million people is a very small market. So Israeli startup competes on a global scale from day one. It's much, much more difficult. Sometimes naive entrepreneurs will try to take the whole world and market to the whole world from day one. This is obviously a recipe for failure because every startup you have to be very, very focused to choose it because you have a lot of you are in a global village. There's no startup that doesn't have competition. There's always competition. As a result, you have to choose a target market, yes, a niche market, where your comparative advantage vis-a-vis the competition is maximized. Focus on them, succeed there, and then open it up to more and more segments and more countries. But as a result, those startups in Israel that are successful are typically because there's no local market, local friendly market to succeed. Once they are successful in the United States or in China or wherever, it's easier for them to become a global company. So again, so what I was saying is the following: that in the startup nation, in the startup sector, because they are selling on a global scale and not so much in Israel, the government doesn't intervene. They cannot intervene in their target markets, and obviously there's no local importers or producers that try to protect their position by applying to the government to put regulations that will favor the established players. And indeed, we see a huge success in the startup nation, in the startup sector. Just to give you a few examples, one of the first success stories is a company called Checkpoint, which is now a public company that is worth, I didn't check lately, but I think 20 billion. How much? $15 billion. They invented the firewall, the things that protects internet from intruders. That was in 1992, I think, or 1993, where they started. They came out of the Israeli equivalent of the NSA. It's called 8200, it's not a secret anymore. And they had all the knowledge. So there were three founders. They came to a company here called BRM in Jerusalem that were making antivirus products. There were three principals. Two of them were the Barkat brothers. They made some money on antivirus program. They probably were making viruses that nobody knows, and then they sold antivirus. But they had some money. They gave them $250,000 investment for 50% of the company. And of course, Checkpoint became very fast a huge success story. And the Barkat brothers made a lot of money. And then they took BRM and made it into a venture capital firm. Who are the Barkat brothers? One of them is Nir Barkat, who is now the mayor of Jerusalem. He left venture capital and he wanted to fix government. He is now the mayor of Jerusalem, and now he's switching. He wants to become a politician on national scale. And his other brother, Eli, he runs the BRM investment company, a good friend of mine. How was Checkpoint so successful coming out of Israel? They were smart. They understood that if they will try to go to 127 countries and all the segments as a little Israeli startup, they will have no chance. What did they do? They said, because we're small, we're going to focus on someone who is already established, who will sell our products for us. Who was the biggest player in selling servers at the time? It was Sun Corporation. Many of you don't even know the name, but Sun was the biggest company at the time selling servers. And they made a deal with them to put the firewall on their servers. And all of a sudden, they had a distribution channel to approach the whole world. So this is another rule for a startup company. You have to be focused. Number two, try to be nanas al gabe anak, a midget on the shoulders of a giant. Find a giant that will market for you. Later on, where you're established, where customers know you, they departed from Sun and they established their own direct distribution channels. And it's very interesting because this is one of the companies who didn't sell out. Most of the Israeli startups, were purchased by global companies, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. From time to time, some smart person comes and says, "Oh, we are selling our souls to the goyim. We are selling our souls to the big company." That's nonsense. In Silicon Valley, also, most of the companies are being sold because selling companies is also part of the Yad HaNe'elama. How do you say it in English? Invisible hand. Well, selling companies, if you have something good, right? You have an asset. You developed, for example, a great chip. I invested in a company called Galileo. Company was purchased by Marvell for $2.2 billion. In a startup company, you invent something new, let's say a chip that does networking. Now, if you want to maximize the value of this asset, what do you need to do? You need to sell it. How do you sell? You have to hire 10,000 people to go all over the world, to go to the customers, try to convince them to buy from a little startup. So first of all, you have to hire a lot of people. Number two, you're still a startup, nobody heard about it from Israel. But if you sell the asset to Intel, they have the salesman, and they also have the brand. Everybody will buy from Qualcomm or Intel. So this asset is worth for Intel 10 times than what it's worth for the startup company. They are willing to pay based on future sales and earning, which they can, in other words, they can value the asset much more, and they have the management and sales infrastructure to value this asset. This is the reason why most startup companies will be sold to bigger company. However, if you have already an experienced management team that knows how to build big companies, they may go for it alone. So now, like 20 years ago when I started, there were no experienced global managers in Israel. They were all smart engineers. But today you have repeat entrepreneurs. For example, one of the founders of Checkpoint, Shlomo Kramer, left Checkpoint, and since then he started something like 10 companies in cyberspace. Two of them are big public companies, and many of them are on the way. For example, Dov Moran, another great entrepreneur, the one whose company invented the איך קוראים לזה? Disk on key, right. Flash drive, which is called disk on key, right? All my data is here. Were invented by Israeli company headed by Dov Moran. So in his next company, he decided he's going to make a new smartphone. He failed, but you see a transformation from entrepreneurs who go after niche markets, small markets, to entrepreneurs who are going all the way for the gold. So we see now more and more companies going for the gold. For example, Waze went for Google Maps was already active when they started. They decided they're going to conquer this market. And indeed, they were very, very successful. They sold too early, only for $1.4 billion to Google. I invested in a company called MoveIt. How many know who MoveIt is? Right. So MoveIt is Waze. What Waze is for cars, MoveIt is for public transportation. You want to go from here to Tel Aviv, they'll tell you all the options that you can go by public transportation. But similar to Waze, it's based on crowdsourced information. In other words, they have editors and people who are part of the community that will give real-time information. For example, if the bus is 20 minutes late, you won't know it from just looking at the tables. But in MoveIt, because those people are part of the community, you'll automatically get notification that the bus is 20 minutes late. Maybe you want to take another bus, etc. MoveIt, even though it was only established in 2013 has today 40 million customers all over the world, 1,000 cities, and they put another city every day by the community, by the editors. It's quite amazing how this, what's called the... collective intelligence. Yes, כלכלת שיתוף. So I'm sure you'll hear many, many more examples of why free enterprise, minimum government intervention, minimum government regulations is going to make each of us as a consumer and also as an entrepreneur better off. And the best example of it in Israel is the technology sector, the startup sector, because it is not affected by the Israeli regulation, and it competes on a global world on the principle of, the better, the one who's best is going to succeed. Thank you very much, and I'll take some questions.
So maybe I'll take the liberty of asking you the first question, which is, everybody knows how impressive Israeli high tech has been, but if we look at the overall Israeli economy, it's not so impressive. So if the Prime Minister called you and said, Shlomo, could you do me a favor and just briefly come into the government, and if you agree to do that, I'll let you do whatever you want. I'll give you one thing to do to make the whole economy as successful as the high-tech sector. What would you do?
Just one thing?
What would be the top thing on the list?
I will abolish all import and customs tax, as well as sales tax. I think that would be, and also make it, on the same token, make it, the ability to people to import anything they want free, rather than like today. Number two, what I will do, I will put a rule that every Knesset member, every parliament member, want to introduce a new law, has to find 2 laws that you have to abolish. Because the nature of the beast is that every Knesset member wants to make his impression, and he finds some good cause. The government should give money to this sector because there are poor people. Sounds great, let's do it. And then you get more and more regulation and more laws, and it becomes a total, macaroni, spaghetti to do anything. For example, if you have a look, anybody who's going to want to buy a house or want to go into the real estate sector, the taxation there is so convoluted because it's like one after the other regulations.
You said earlier that most of startup companies actually wants to be sold at some point to a big foreign company. My question is, I believe that if those startup companies actually stay, let's say in Israel, and started here, and will be big here, let's say like Teva, so it's much better for the Israeli economics. So how actually we can convince those startup founders to stay here and not sell their company?
I didn't say that startup companies should sell. I just said that the reality is that most startup companies are being acquired by bigger, this is also true in Silicon Valley, bigger companies because they can value their assets more efficiently than the startup company do. I don't think we should convince entrepreneurs to go it alone and stay independent forever. I think they should do whatever is good for them and their shareholders, because again, if they, let me put a caveat though, every startup companies, every business that you create should be built in a way that it can stand on its own feet. You cannot build a business that will be sold to others. The business will not be successful. It's like if your only option is to be sold, then you don't have any option, right? It's like some of our smart politicians say, our only option is to make peace with Palestinians, then you already lost in the negotiations from day one. You have to have other options if you want to make a deal. You have to have another options to walk away. If you, from the beginning, say, I don't have any other options, you lost. However, the reality is that most startup companies will be sold. And because to run a big global companies takes great leadership and experienced leadership. Most new entrepreneurs don't have those qualities. Some have. Mark Zuckerberg has. Bill Gates had, right? Steve Jobs. But most entrepreneurs don't have it. So as those of you who want to become entrepreneurs, most likely the first startup company probably will be sold. Some exceptions. But in the second and third, you can try to make it all the way. Yes?
I think what worries some Israelis, and I think there's some truth to it, is that the success of the high-tech sector has made a small number of people very, very wealthy. And that's great. That's fine. But not very much of those benefits, because of the forces you're talking about, have been felt by the general public. I think the challenge for those of us who want a less regulated Israeli economy is to make the case that if the rest of the economy was like that, then the benefits would go to the average person, which I think is a genuine concern. That I don't know if that was your question, but I think the question is, how do you boost? It's great that Israel has unleashed the creativity. It's great for the world. I mean, it's unbelievable. I use Waze every day. And it's great for the Israelis who have had the opportunity to use their skills. The question is, can we spread those benefits more widely in a more free society?
So, for example, the most valuable company in the world is Apple Computers, right? They make iPhones and other stuff. And they have huge margins, right? But what did you buy? Who's got an iPhone here, for example? Why did you buy an iPhone? They make huge margins. Huh? Because it's, for the price, it's a better smartphone, you thought, right? It's a great smartphone. So you benefited from it. Even though Apple, has huge margins, still they give us a product which is more valuable to us than what I have to pay for it. That's the nature of the beast. So first of all, as a general answer, I don't have to tell it to you, obviously, is that great companies, even if they are monopoly, they are benefiting also the customers. Number two is, how do we get, that was the real question, more people involved in this great startup community? I think the answer is through doing things like this, education, giving the people the confidence and the empowerment that they can go and do things in the world. Look at the most valuable companies in the world. They are all were startup companies in the last 20 years. Like Apple, a little bit longer, Microsoft, Google, only started in 1994, I think. Not talking about Facebook, Oracle. All the value in the world was created by startup companies. It's amazing. And, if we believe in free enterprise and we are not afraid to go and do things, that's the way to participate in this.
All those guys you talked about, those men and women who made those startups, had they had some way to get this human capital that enabled them to be that successful and to come up with those ideas. If a person does not have this initial human capital, how can he make it in this economy?
What do you mean by human capital?
Intelligence, the the personality to be a successful entrepreneur, manager, or?
Well, first of all, there are only few people who can be great leaders and entrepreneurs. However, you can be part of a startup companies without being the leader. You know, Facebook created more millionaires, I don't know, thousands of millionaires, even, I don't know the exact number. Are you a leader? Can you lead the startup companies? That comes from God. I don't think leadership can be taught. Techniques of how to do things better can be taught, but leadership not. However, if you don't have to be a leader in order to participate, you can be engineer, salesperson, etc., etc. So you have, and even that, most of it is the talent that you were born with, which you are daring to do things. Some people prefer job security, so they go to work for the government or IBM, etc. That's okay too. I'm not judging, but you know, each one. The most important things, and that's definitely a big problem in Israel. The education system in Israel, again, completely patronized by the government, from kindergarten all the way to university. Don't teach economics, business, entrepreneurship. So now they're starting outside programs like this at various ages, but it's not part of the curriculum, and that's a pity.
You mentioned that one of the reasons the high-tech sector really succeeded in Israel is because they had to compete with the rest of the world. And I don't know if it's true, but I always thought that one of the reasons that the high-tech sector was actually successful in Israel is because he arrived after the socialist years, the Israeli government that we will call up to the 1985. And basically the high-tech sector didn't get regulated because the high-tech sector didn't exist like it exists, for example, for the food sector or for the housing sector. And so basically they were able to escape the hyper-regulation, hyper-socialist rules of the state of Israel. And also it's a sector which is moving so fast that the bureaucrats is not catching up. So in a way they were blessed by historical and also by the nature of the business. And I am sure that if you could create the same conditions, and that's, I agree with Ross, from the falafel stand, where people with less intelligence could enter the market, with the same rules, we probably get the same rate of growth in the non-high-tech sector than in the high-tech sector, where now we get about a sixth of growth. So.
Yeah, to some extent, yes, because we already see that the unions are trying to get the workers in big high-tech companies like Amdocs to organize. There is now struggle between. However, they cannot regulate the markets, which is the most important thing, because the markets are not here. So it always will be less regulated. Thank you very much, and enjoy a great program in the coming week.
Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.